Escaping the two-party paradigm is a necessary step in actually making a change in politics. Here's why you need to end your relationship with the establishment and escape the propaganda. First, let's examine the two-party paradigm itself. What do I mean? Many things, actually. On a surface level, obviously one understands the conflict between the Democrats and the Republicans. On an ideological level, it's the conflict between neoconservatives and neoliberals. And on a broader scale, it's the left versus right conflict. The first step to escaping the two-party paradigm is understanding the false dichotomy. A false dichotomy is defined as a situation in which two alternative points of view are presented as the only options, when others are available. In modern politics, there are only two viewpoints of debate promoted to the masses as viable by the establishment, as well as the mainstream media. Television ratings reflect that, voter turnout reflects that, and the current positions in government reflect that. Understanding the false dichotomy begins at understanding the establishment and its goals. Think to yourself, what purpose does the state serve, and what goal does it strive for? The answer is simple. The state is here to protect your rights, and it strives to ensure that every one of its citizens is protected equally under the law. Right? Well, that's the ideal answer. However, if we examine what the state has committed in practice over the years, then we realize this. The state's only purpose is survival, and the only goals it strives to achieve are growth and profit. Ask yourself this: do I know where my tax dollars are going? If the answer is no, you might be shocked to hear that the U.S. is spending $783 billion on its military budget, along with 6 ongoing foreign wars, all with massive civilian death counts, as well as $3.8 billion in military aid to Israel, which is in direct conflict with Palestine to this day, who just recently bombed the Gaza Strip again, on Christmas Day no less, resulting in a children's hospital being struck and civilians killed. If that isn't shocking enough, bailouts to the oil industry exceeded $7 billion this year, all under the cover of COVID-19. Pharmaceutical corporations are set to reach well over $1 trillion in profits this year. Of course, with COVID-19, much of the money coming directly from taxpayers' pockets to fund research and now to provide the wildly untested COVID-19 vaccine, which is a can of worms in and of itself. And to top it all off, the best Congress could give the taxpayer in return was $600. All while families are starving, 100,000 small businesses are closed forever, and COVID restrictions continue to bottleneck the market into near monopolistic status. This is just 2020, mind you. If we take a look back at 2008 and its disaster of a bailout process, money went to banks at the expense of the taxpayer, as well as automotive corporations, all of which laid off employees even after receiving handouts, just as they did again in 2020. History repeats itself, which leads me to my next point. The establishment is the government itself. The false dichotomy reveals itself when we start to analyze programs promulgated through the years in a bipartisan manner, whether hidden or open. Let's take, for example, the most egregious of these programs, Middle Eastern drone striking. Everyone knows, at this point, of Barack Obama's rampant drone striking in the Middle East, during his 2 terms in office. Of course, it's inferred that the same was done under the Bush administration that preceded him, and that is true, though not even close to the extent that Obama promulgated the practice. A report stating, quote, "If Obama apologized for 1 civilian drone victim every day, it would take him 3 years," end quote. And that is a low estimate, considering the data analyzed doesn't include strikes in Afghanistan, Iraq, or Syria, nor does it include Saudi-led coalition strikes in Yemen, almost all of which are paid for by the U.S. government. What is shocking, however, is to find out that Donald Trump, whom the neoconservatives tout as being the most peaceful president in recent history, due to the fact that he started no wars and brought peace to the Israeli-Middle Eastern conflict, the former being only true by technicality and the latter being entirely untrue, has signed off on more drone strike attacks in his 4 years than all of Obama's 8. On top of this, Trump revoked a policy requiring CIA officials to report civilian death counts via drone strikes outside of war zones, potentially padding his numbers by the thousands as a result due to this information not being readily available. But let's cycle back a bit. Why is this information important to know? This is pure, hard proof that agendas get promulgated in a bipartisan manner even when they're absolutely horrible for fiscal policy, taxpayer return, quality of life for servicemen, and when they contribute to humanitarian crises across the globe. Need more? Think about this. Taxpayer dollars go to major corporations when the government picks winners and losers via subsidization all the time. But bailouts are another level of picking the winners in an economy entirely propped up by the government and its money printer machine. In 2001, Bush bailed out corporations following 9/11 in the heat of the media frenzy. The story was buried, and most don't even recognize that it happened. In 2008, the most notable of government bailouts to most, Obama bailed out corporations amid the housing crisis and recession, far exceeding Bush. And in an almost ironic turn of events in 2020, Trump bailed out the most of any president in history under the media frenzy of COVID-19. This is, of course, all while small businesses were being forced to shut down to meet COVID restrictions, leading to many closing their doors forever, as well as the few that were allowed to stay open being forced to adhere to draconian guidelines, all for a virus with a 0.009% infection fatality rate for those under 50. If you need any more direct proof, think about it this way. Congress is meant to represent the people of the United States. As we went over earlier, the purpose of government should be protection of rights and equal treatment under the law. Furthering that, it is our representatives' job to represent the will of the people. What does Congress, tasked with representing the people, come up with for COVID-19 relief after a year of economic devastation and draconian restrictions? $600 stimulus checks. All while foreign countries get billions in the same package, including the now widely spread $10 million to Pakistan for gender programs, as if that was necessary to tie into the COVID-19 relief voting. Next, and probably most egregious of all, is the lie of a republic. In one of the best videos detailing the Princeton Representation in Government study, titled Corruption is Legal in America, it states,
"Does the government represent the people?" Now, this is what they found. This axis here represents public support for any given idea. On the left, at 0%, are ideas that not a single American wants. On the right, at 100%, are ideas that everyone supports. This axis represents the likelihood of Congress passing a law that reflects any of these ideas, from a 0 to a 100% chance. On this graph, an ideal republic would look like this. If 50% of the public supports an idea, there's a 50% chance of it becoming law. If 80% of us support something, there's an 80% chance. You get the idea. Now, most Americans would probably agree that, with a few exceptions, we should be as close to this ideal as possible. Unfortunately, the way America actually works doesn't even come close. Take an idea that nobody supports, literally nobody, and it has about a 30% chance of becoming federal law. Now, take an incredibly popular idea, the most popular idea this country has ever seen, and there's also about a 30% chance of it becoming law. This means that the number of American voters for or against any idea has no impact on the likelihood that Congress will make it law. Put another way, and I'm just going to quote the Princeton study directly here, the preferences of the average American appear to have only a minuscule, near zero, statistically non-significant impact upon public policy. So if you've ever felt like your opinion doesn't matter and that the government doesn't really care what you think, well, you're right. But there's a catch. This flat line only accounts for the bottom 90% of income earners in America. Economic elites, business interests, people who can afford lobbyists, they get their own line. Look at how much closer their line is to the ideal. When they want something, the government is much more likely to do it. And when they don't, they have the power to completely block it from happening, no matter how much the rest of the country supports it. They get what they want, and guess who ends up paying for it?
Why is this so important? Well, it ties into everything and more. First, to those who are stuck in the two-party paradigm, it shows that no matter the side you vote for, lobbyists and special interest groups take precedence far before the people's will ever does. Second, it shows to those who believe in the necessity of a democracy or democratic republic that we currently have failed on every front to achieve a functioning representative system. Third, it goes to show that the establishment disregards the will of the people any chance it can get in favor of profit and the revolving door, which leads me to my next point. The revolving door of politics and corporations is one of the most blatant forms of the establishment feeding itself. Not hard to spot, the most common occurrences of the revolving door involve CEOs from big industries, whether that's pharmaceutical, oil, or agriculture, getting leading positions in the oncoming president's cabinet. For Trump, the most obvious was Rex Tillerson, former CEO of ExxonMobil, being appointed to the Secretary of State. The revolving door doesn't just end at corporations, however. Under Biden, Avril Haines, who was the former deputy director of the CIA under Obama, and one who was personally responsible for the drone strikes under his administration, is now the director of national intelligence. With all of this information in mind, let's take a look at the growing dissent for the establishment and why you should support it. First, and probably the most fresh in people's minds, the protest at the Capitol from the right is important to examine. The America First and/or QAnon crowd has a pretty good understanding of governmental corruption, at the very least coming from the left. The protest, while resulting in the sad death of one woman, as well as 3 others from unrelated injuries, was mostly a successful show of the populace fighting against the corruption of the establishment, even if somewhat misguided. For those on the left, dissent against the establishment was seen all across the summer. Whether resulting in massive rioting or simply a peaceful show of grievance with the government and its actions, it's a definite step in a direction that we should all be rooting for, leading to my next point. Antifa specifically, or those in the left-leaning anarchist crowd, need to define their values and stay true to their goals. I see so many on the left siding with the government rather than fighting them as a common enemy, if only to dunk on the right, or the dreaded buzzword of fascists. Left-leaning libertarians need to realize that the government isn't going to support their ideas just because they're in a common alliance against the right, and right-leaning libertarians need to see the same thing, if not to the lesser extent of political figures like Donald Trump. Those in the establishment will never wish to see the establishment fall. Figures like Donald Trump, while portrayed very well through QAnon and right-wing media, are not secretly against the establishment. If they truly were, they would have been gone years ago. That or real-world change would have happened, both of which we did not see in these past 4 years under Trump. Neoconservatives and neoliberals are a common enemy of the libertarian crowd. They grow more and more authoritarian at every turn. The fact that people are waking up to Republican corruption or Democrat corruption is a good starting point, but it's simply not enough when one is still blinded by the two-party paradigm illusion. The illusion that says, well, when my guy with a red tie gets into office, things will change. He's not corrupt, or vice versa. This point is meant to be heard by those in the liberty-oriented or even anarchist crowds that still participate in the two-party illusion. Get out. The only real change happens when the establishment is seen as the common enemy of the people. It's important to unify, even against your ideological differences. When all is said and done, then will be the time to debate whether the economy should function in a capitalist manner or a communist manner. As of right now, none of that is going to happen ideally if we continue to allow the establishment itself to grow, not only in size but in support of the masses. Leading to my final point, centrism and the idea of political ignorance. When all is said and done, where does America most align? Ironically, the answer is nowhere. While ideological differences in the two-party illusion do continue to grow, the plurality of voters in America are independent voters, meaning they don't have strong party ties to either side of the paradigm, but they aren't really equipped with enough knowledge of the establishment and its corruption to actually see themselves out of the paradigm either. Those watching who believe in the ideals of a republic or a democracy, even against the rampant corruption that comes with it, need to understand this divide and conquer mentality of modern politics and the division that we see so rampant across the United States. It's something that comes with the establishment itself. Most, if not all, of the moderates I've seen taking a stance against the recent protests at the Capitol all fear civil war the most. And if that's the case, taking a stance against the one political machine responsible for creating such a circumstance should be the ultimate goal of moderates. We can stray away from political philosophy, the idea of tyranny amid the government's social contract with the populace. But if you were shocked by any of the points brought up within this video, whether it was the bombing of civilians among 6 current ongoing foreign wars, the trillions in bailouts to corporations while small businesses are continually shutting down, or the billions to foreign countries who use that money to bomb children's hospitals on Christmas Day, then you should continue looking into corruption further, understanding that the government that you would normally desperately fight to justify is actually not as helpful in aiding or protecting the populace as you might think. While brief and broadly sweeping, I believe my ultimate point on unification for those on the left and the right is something to truly consider, specifically for those in the left-leaning anarchist crowd who decry fascism while not realizing that the same people they're claiming are fascists actually view the establishment as a common enemy. On top of that, for those in the moderate position, considering the establishment as the enemy of the people is something that many should be flocking to support, instead of seeing the establishment and the state as something to cry out in support of. In the next upcoming videos, I will be detailing specifically who the most egregious common enemies are to the people, as well as how they've most blatantly detrimentally affected the populace of not only our own country, but foreign countries as well. Remember, it's our job to continue to take action and to fight against the common enemy of the people. For those originally shocked and appalled at recent events, maybe reconsider your original valuation. You might find yourself agreeing with the principle more than your original reaction led on.